The camera fades in fast, sirens in the distance, engines roaring, and a tough biker gang tearing through a dusty Texas highway. Then, the narrator's voice drops low and dramatic. You are watching Smile and Scars, where every scar tells a different story and every smile hides a lesson. Today's story begins with a biker who thought he was the toughest man alive, until he lifted his hand against the father of a legend, and just 60 seconds later, he discovered the biggest mistake of his life. The story begins in a small town outside Austin, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where old diners still have neon signs buzzing in the heat. On this particular morning, Ray Norris, the father of Chuck Norris, walked down the road toward his favorite breakfast spot. Ray wasn't the kind of man who carried himself like he was special. He was humble, calm, and respected by every local around. He had the same steel in his eyes that his son Chuck would one day become famous for. But Ray never boasted about anything. He lived slow, talked gentle, and treated people with kindness. But that morning wasn't ordinary, because the Texas Road Reapers biker gang had just rolled into the same town, loud, aggressive, and thirsty for trouble. Their engines thundered like a storm, and every shopkeeper quietly locked their door as they rode past. The leader, a huge man named Iron Jaw, was known for starting fights for no reason other than proving a point. He lived for intimidation, for fear, for watching others step back when he entered a room, and today he woke up angry. Ray Norris pushed open the diner door and smiled at the waitress, Betty, the same waitress who'd been serving him pancakes for a decade. She poured his coffee without even asking, his usual routine, but then the glass on the windows started shaking. Engines revved outside, and 6 bikers stomped into the diner. Everyone fell silent. Betty stopped mid-pour. The cook froze behind the counter, and Ray simply turned his head and watched them with quiet eyes. Iron Jaw spotted the only empty booth, Ray's booth, and as soon as he saw an old man sitting there calmly, sipping coffee like the world wasn't about to explode, Iron Jaw's lips curled into a grin. He hated calm people. They reminded him of control. He thrived on chaos. He marched toward Ray, boots thundering on the cracked linoleum floor. "That's my booth," he growled. Ray looked up politely. "Son, I've been sitting in this booth longer than your engine's been running, but you're welcome to take the next table." Iron Jaw blinked. No fear, no tremble, just calm. He didn't like that. "Old man," he said louder, "move." The entire diner watched in horror. Ray set down his cup, wiped his hands with a napkin, and stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't square up. He simply said, "Respect doesn't cost anything." Iron Jaw shoved him. Ray stumbled back into the counter. The room gasped. Betty whispered, "Oh no, somebody call Chuck." But the call wasn't needed, because Iron Jaw wasn't satisfied with just a shove. He lifted his hand high as if to strike Ray across the face, an act that would become the biggest regret of his life. And just before his hand came down, Ray caught his wrist. The diner froze. The biker froze. Iron Jaw's eyes widened. Ray Norris spoke softly, "Don't raise your hand at people who give you no harm." Iron Jaw ripped his arm free in anger and grabbed Ray by the shirt. And that's when it happened. The sound that cut through the diner like a blade. The door burst open. A shadow filled the entryway. Boots hit the floor heavy. The air shifted. Chuck Norris stepped inside. He had been visiting town that same morning, planning to meet his father for breakfast. But instead, he walked into a scene where a huge biker had his hand raised against the man who raised him. Chuck's voice was low, almost quiet. Too quiet. "Take your hand off my father." Every biker turned. Every customer exhaled in relief. Iron Jaw released Ray slowly, but he made the worst decision of his life next. He laughed. A loud, mocking, reckless laugh. "So you're the son," he smirked. "He didn't raise you very tall, did he?" Chuck didn't blink. I said, "Step away." Iron Jaw stepped closer instead, and Betty whispered to the cook, "Lord save these fools." Iron Jaw cracked his knuckles. "What are you gonna do about it, boy?" Chuck Norris tilted his head. "You don't want to know." But the biker wanted to push it further. He grabbed a chair and slammed it across the floor. "You think you're tough?" Iron Jaw taunted. "I break guys for breakfast." Ray placed a hand on Chuck's shoulder, "Son, it's fine." "No, Dad," Chuck said quietly. "He raised a hand to you, and no man walks away from that lesson unpaid." The diner remained silent. The bikers leaned back, amused. Iron Jaw got ready for a fight he wouldn't forget. And Chuck took one single step forward. That step was the beginning of the 60 seconds that would change everything for the entire Texas Road Reapers gang. Before Iron Jaw even realized it, before the cook could duck behind the counter, before the customers could grab their phones, it had begun, and the regret that Iron Jaw would feel, deep, painful, unforgettable, would hit him harder than any punch. Because nobody, absolutely nobody, raises a hand to Chuck Norris's father and gets away with it. Old Ray Norris stood in that dusty parking lot like a mountain. The biker gang surrounded him, engines rumbling, leather jackets snapping in the wind. And right in front of him stood the one who had slapped his hand away earlier, Bronco, their towering leader with a beard thick enough to hide a family of raccoons. Bronco grinned, taking a slow step toward Ray, cracking his knuckles as the rest of the gang cheered him on. "So Grandpa's got some spark," Bronco laughed. "Let's see if he can still walk after I'm done." Ray didn't move, he didn't talk, he didn't blink. He just breathed out slow and steady, like a man who'd seen more violence in his lifetime than these bikers could imagine. But Bronco mistook that calm for fear. He lunged. His fists came swinging like hammers, wild and heavy. Ray barely shifted. The punch whooshed past his ear. Bronco threw another, even faster. Ray stepped back a single inch. The fist cut through empty air again. It was like trying to punch smoke. The crowd of bikers stopped laughing. Bronco stopped too, suddenly confused, his breath turning sharp. "You making fun of me, old man?" Ray's voice finally broke through the tension, low and steady. "Son, you don't want to do this." That simple sentence echoed louder than any motorcycle roar. Something about it made even the toughest biker tighten his jaw. Ray wasn't threatening him. He wasn't trash talking. He was warning him almost gently. Bronco snarled, embarrassed in front of his men, and charged like a bull. This time he came in with a full tackle, arms wide, ready to smash Ray into the pavement. But Ray's eyes narrowed, and that was all the warning the universe got. He shifted his weight, pivoted on one foot, and Bronco's giant body flew past him as if tugged by an invisible rope. Ray grabbed his wrist, twisted once clean, smooth, effortless, and Bronco collapsed to his knees with a howl, his arm pinned behind him at an angle not meant for ordinary humans. The entire gang froze. Their leader, the undefeated Bronco, was on the ground, face twisted in pain. Ray didn't even break a sweat. "You still want to continue?" he asked. Bronco tried to wriggle free, and Ray tightened his grip just enough for a single loud pop to echo. Not a break, just a reminder. The biker went silent. Ray released him. Bronco stumbled backward, clutching his arm, gasping. "Who the hell are you?" he choked out. Ray brushed imaginary dust from his hands. "No one special," he said. "Just someone who believes in respect." Bronco stared at him, completely shaken. The gang members exchanged glances, trying to understand what they just witnessed. The old man wasn't strong. He wasn't fast. He was something else, something they'd never seen. Ray turned to walk back inside, thinking the lesson was over. But some men don't learn fast. One of the bikers, a skinny kid they called Ratchet, stepped forward holding a chain, swinging it aggressively. "You ain't walking away after embarrassing our leader," Ratchet hissed. "We're finishing this." Another biker chimed in, "Yeah, nobody makes a fool out of the Iron Serpents." Ray sighed, deeply, painfully. Like a teacher watching the class voluntarily fail the exam, he slowly removed his jacket, folded it neatly, and placed it on the hood of a nearby car. "Last chance, boys," he said softly. Ratchet spun the chain and rushed forward. Ray grabbed the chain mid-swing, one finger, one. Ratchet froze, eyes bulging. Then Ray pulled him forward like he weighed nothing, tapped his elbow, and sent him crashing to the ground. Another biker jumped in. Ray ducked, swept his leg, and the man fell like a tree chopped clean at the base. Two more lunged at once, a punch and a tackle. Ray twisted the puncher's wrist until he screamed, then used the man's own momentum to flip him into the other biker. They collided, groaning, rolling across the asphalt. It wasn't a fight. It was a demonstration. Ray Norris moved with a calm precision that made the world slow down around him. Every step, every grab, every motion was clean and controlled. He wasn't hurting them, he was teaching them. But Bronco saw something else. He saw that Ray wasn't just some old man. He was trained, not trained recently, trained deeply, trained long ago. Trained by someone powerful. Bronco backed away, whispering to the biker standing beside him, "This guy, he fights like someone I've heard about." The biker frowned. "Who?" Bronco's voice dropped. "The Norris family." The biker's eyes widened like saucers. Everyone had heard stories. Stories of a martial arts dynasty. Stories of a legend who could break a man with a flick of his wrist. Stories of a name that made even the toughest fighters swallow hard. Chuck Norris. Ray grabbed another biker by the shirt and gently set him down on the curb like he was putting a toddler in timeout. The man didn't even try to get back up. Ray dusted off his hands again, as if disappointed he had to use them twice in the same day. Bronco swallowed. "Guys," he muttered, "we need to stop, now." But the last, most stubborn biker tank, a mountain of muscle, didn't listen. He charged at Ray full speed, roaring like a freight train. The ground trembled under his weight. Ray didn't move until the final second. Then he stepped aside, placed one palm on Tank's back, and Tank flew forward like he'd been shoved by a truck. He crashed into a parked bike, knocking it over with a metallic clang. The remaining bikers stared at Ray as he stood there, calm as a monk in meditation. "Are we done?" Ray asked. No one answered. The silence was deeper than fear. Then a new sound broke the air. A car door slammed. Boots hit the ground. Someone stepped out. Someone the bikers instantly recognized. Someone whose reputation traveled faster than bullets. Chuck Norris himself had just arrived, and the moment he saw his father standing in the middle of a circle of terrified bikers, his eyes told a very different story than anyone expected. The diner froze, every fork halfway lifted, every conversation sliced in half by the sound of heavy boots rushing across the wooden floor. The biker who had shoved Ray earlier came back with two more riders, both bigger, both covered in leather patches, both smiling like trouble, had finally found the man they'd been looking for. Ray didn't flinch. He didn't even turn around. He just took a slow sip of his coffee, placed the cup back down with the same calmness he had shown since the very first moment, and whispered to the waitress beside him, "You might want to step back, sweetheart." She obeyed instantly. The leader of the three marched forward until he was standing right behind Ray, shadow swallowing the small stool, voice deep and loaded with threat. "Old man, you hit our boy. And now we're gonna break you." The entire diner gasped at the same time. A couple tried to slip out, but the second biker kicked the door shut with a heavy boot. Nobody's leaving. The tension tightened like a fist closing around the room. But Ray was still calm, too calm, like he had seen this exact moment 1,000 times in his life and already knew how it would end. He slowly set his napkin on the table, adjusted his shoulders, and stood up. Except he didn't stand in a rush. He didn't jerk. He rose slowly, controlled, deliberate, like a man who had nothing to fear from anyone in that room. When he turned around, the three bikers looked confused for a moment. Ray wasn't trembling. Ray wasn't backing away. Ray wasn't begging. Ray was simply ready. The leader stepped forward again. "You think you're some kind of tough guy?" Ray shook his head. "No, but my son is." Some people laughed nervously. They didn't understand, not yet. The leader grabbed Ray's collar and growled, "Then where is your tough guy son now?" A voice cut through the diner before Ray could answer. Right here. Every head snapped toward the entrance. A man stepped inside, calm, confident, walking with the kind of presence you don't learn in a gym, but only through years of mastery. His boots were silent. His eyes were sharp. His aura filled the entire diner in seconds, and every single person recognized him instantly. Chuck Norris. The diner erupted in whispers. Some people froze, some gasped. The bikers' expressions flipped instantly, from arrogance to panic. Chuck walked forward like a storm approaching steady ground. He didn't yell. He didn't rush. He didn't even glare. He simply looked at the leader, then at Ray's collar in his fist, then back at the leader again. "You have 3 seconds," Chuck said softly, "to take your hand off my father." The leader trembled, but ego shoved fear aside. "Why should I?" he snapped. Chuck stepped closer, only inches from him, voice low and dangerous. "Because, if you don't, you won't have a hand left to remove." The biker's hand flew back like it had been burnt. The 2 men behind him looked at each other in panic, because this wasn't a bar fight anymore. This wasn't a bully picking on an old man. This was survival, but ego is loud, stupid, and fearless when it shouldn't be. The second biker charged first. A mistake. Chuck moved so fast half the diner didn't even see what happened. The biker lunged. Chuck sidestepped, tapped his elbow, twisted his wrist, and the man was suddenly on the floor, staring at the ceiling, wondering how he got there. The third biker tried to jump Chuck from behind. Ray stepped forward. "Not so fast, son." Ray's elbow fired like a shot. Clean, sharp, perfect. The biker folded, dropping to his knees, clutching his jaw. The leader was shaking now. All his confidence, all his swagger, all his bravado. It evaporated like water on a hot pan. He pointed at Chuck with a trembling finger. "We didn't know he was your father." Chuck took 1 step closer, eyes locked on him. "That's the problem," Chuck said evenly. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is, to treat them with respect." The leader swallowed hard, nodding like a child being scolded by a parent far stronger than him. Then Chuck leaned in a little closer, voice quiet, but terrifying. "Apologize," the biker blinked to who? Chuck stepped aside just enough to reveal Ray standing calm, arms crossed. The biker swallowed again. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched you." Ray nodded once. "All right." Chuck wasn't done. "Now apologize to the waitress." The biker turned to the waitress behind the counter. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, truly." She nodded softly. Chuck tapped the man lightly on the shoulder. "Good. Now leave. And don't let me see you or your gang in this diner again." The 3 bikers practically ran out of the play, tripping over chairs, stumbling into each other, pushing the door so hard it almost broke. The diner was silent for a moment. Then applause, loud, long, grateful. Chuck smiled and hugged his father. "You okay, Dad?" Ray smiled back. "I was fine. Just didn't want to break anything in here. The food's too good." Chuck laughed. The waitress brought them both fresh coffee. On the house, forever. Ray winked. "Well, now I'm glad there was a fight." Chuck shook his head with a grin. "Come on, Dad. Let's eat before you get into another fight." The 2 sat down together, side by side, as the entire diner returned to life. But with a new energy, a warm one, a respectful one, because that day everyone learned 2 lessons. Never bully an old man. And never, ever raise your hand against Chuck Norris's father.